Hello and welcome to Real Obscure. I'm Kevin H. Shaw, and this week we're taking a deep dive into the muddied movie waters of a film that, despite having been released just 5 years ago, seems to have sunk all the way into the depths of Davy Jones's locker. From 2020, it's the subaquatic survival horror Underwater. So I'm going to read you the official synopsis, and let's just see if you can spot what's wrong here. Kristen Stewart stars in this electrifying sci-fi thriller as a mechanical engineer who must try to save her fellow crew members following the destruction of their mining rig 7 miles beneath the ocean's surface. 5,000 miles from land, their only hope for survival is to walk across the ocean floor to an abandoned vessel. But their already dangerous journey becomes even more treacherous as a mysterious new threat appears at the ocean's depths. Now, from that description, and the trailer, which is very oddly edited and has all the events completely out of order, you'd assume this movie was some kind of aquatic disaster flick, with Stewart and co trying to fix equipment and survive as their rig floods around them. And yes, the movie does open with that to a certain degree. But, and this is a spoiler, but I have to tell you this because it's very, very important, Underwater is a full-on creature feature. Now, I'm not sure if the idea behind this marketing was to kind of do a From Dusk Till Dawn scenario where the movie goes off in a completely unexpected direction and gives the audience something they wouldn't expect, but I think here this actually ruined the movie's chances. You know, it's like saying, oh, here's Friday the 13th, a movie in which some people go camping by a lake, and then you expect people to realise that it's a horror movie. For my sins, I actually did used to work in marketing, and one of the things I was always told was make sure your audience know what it is that you're selling them. But it seems that nobody at 20th Century Fox even got that memo, because it seems so keen to just downplay the presence of these creatures. And they're fantastical monsters. They're not natural creatures like giant squid or sharks. These things are the stuff of nightmares. Anyway, Underwater was directed by William Eubank. It was written by Brian Duffield and Adam Cozad, and stars Kristen Stewart, TJ Miller, and Vincent Cassel. The supporting cast is Jessica Henwick, John Gallagher Jr., and Mahmoudou Athi. William Eubank started his career as a camera operator and cinematographer, and he later worked for a number of years with Panavision developing their digital camera systems. He said this was a great learning experience for him as he was on set constantly with other movie makers and learning their process and how the whole system works. He went on to direct the movie Love in 2011, The Signal in 2014, and Paranormal Activity Next of Kin in 2021. Kristen Stewart is probably best known for her portrayal of Bella in the Twilight movie series, but she has been working since the age of 8. You probably forgot that she actually played Jodie Foster's daughter in David Fincher's Panic Room. She also appeared in the 2019 reboot of Charlie's Angels and David Cronenberg's 2022 movie Crimes of the Future. Vincent Cassel began his acting career in his native France, appearing in such critically acclaimed movies as La Haine and the action werewolf movie Brotherhood of the Wolf. His US appearances include roles in Jason Bourne and Black Swan. Jessica Henwick has an extensive background in movie and TV work, including roles in Star Wars The Force Awakens, Iron Fist and The Defenders, Game of Thrones, and the upcoming Season 3 of Apple TV's Silo, which you all should be watching because it's excellent. John Gallagher Jr. starred in the 2016 horror movies 10 Cloverfield Lane and Hush, in which he played the psychopathic stalker, and also has a background in theatre, along with a variety of guest roles in television shows such as NYPD Blue, Law & Order, and Westworld. Mahmoudou Athi has a string of movie credits to his name, including Jurassic World Dominion, The Black Box, and Archive 81. He also voiced the character of Wade Ripple in the movie Elemental. So now we've learned a little bit more about the cast and crew, let's take a look at what Underwater is actually about. Kristen Stewart plays Nora, an engineer aboard the Kepler control station located in the depths of the Mariana Trench, where a deep-sea mining operation is currently in progress. The movie begins with a monologue from her discussing how an unnamed he used to talk about how time was an illusion and how being underwater in the dark for extended periods of time causes you to lose track of day and night. As this is going on, she's brushing her teeth, as if she's either preparing for bed or for the coming day. Now this is a subtle thing, and there are a lot of very subtle moments in this movie if you actually pay attention. But this immediately sets the idea where we don't actually know what time of day it is. She hears a dripping sound, which is never a good thing when you're underwater, and discovers that drops of water are falling from the ceiling. Now again we have an interesting sequence here where Nora raises her hand to catch a droplet. In one shot it's her right hand, but when the angle changes it's her left hand, and it then switches back to her right hand in a subsequent shot. Now a lot of people say this is a continuity error, but I don't think that's actually the case. I think this is a deliberate cinematic trick to mess with the audience. You see, I doubt you would even notice this if I didn't point it out to you, but in the words of Harry S. Plinkett, your brain did. So why would the director do this? Well, there are quite a few scenes in this movie that have a kind of hallucinatory, disconnected feel. It's like that feeling when you haven't slept for a long time, or you're kind of hungover with that jet-lagged feeling where nothing quite seems as it should be. There are a number of points in the movie that are like this, and it's something we'll come back to later. But if you do go and watch Underwater after listening to this, pay attention for moments like this. Anyway, back to the plot. So the station is rocked by a series of seismic disturbances until it sustains structural damage that causes a breach. As it begins to flood, Nora flees, attempting to wake up the crew and encountering Rodrigo, played by Mahmoud Afi. And again we have another weird day and night thing, because he recognises her, but she does not recognise Rodrigo. And this is dismissed as being, well, I work the day shift, you work the night shift. And I'm not sure what that kind of thing is doing, but again, it's just part of this general weird, disconnected kind of cut loose from time thing that's going on in this movie. Nora helps Rodrigo escape to safety, but she's then forced to close the bulkhead doors so that the entire base does not depressurise, but in doing so she cuts off the escape of some of her fellow workers. Nora and Rodrigo make their way to the escape pods, but in doing so they have to crawl through a collapsed tunnel, where they find more dead workmates, but the still alive Paul, who's played by TJ Miller, and his soft toy rabbit, Little Paul. Originally Little Paul was going to be a live rabbit, but the producers felt having a cute real animal in some of the more dramatic scenes took the audience out of the story, and so they chose to make him a soft toy instead. Although the original Little Paul does actually make a brief cameo appearance at the very end of the movie. Now again, here is one of those odd moments. Little Paul is a white rabbit, and Big Paul frequently quotes Alice in Wonderland. Again we have this kind of fever dream quality to the movie, you know, this whole idea of chasing white rabbits. For a supposedly dumb horror movie, there's quite a lot of subtext and more depth to this than you'd think, and that's something we'll touch on again later. So the threesome arrive at the pod bay, and they discover that Captain Lucien, who's played by Vincent Cassel, has saved what crew he could, but as a result there are no escape pods left. So the survivors make their way to the command centre, where they find Smith, who's played by John Gallagher Jr., and biologist Emily, who's played by Jessica Henwick, and they've been attempting to contact the surface, but so far have had no success. Left with no options, Captain Lucien proposes that they suit up and walk across the ocean floor to the Roebuck drilling platform, where they will then be able to utilise the escape pods there to return to the surface. But it's a mile's walk through dark, uncharted waters, and, as they'll soon discover, The lack of oxygen, the hostile terrain, and the physical effort of walking there are the least of their worries, because there is something else out there. Now hopefully that's enough to whet your appetite, but as ever, I will be discussing some more minor plot points later, and if you'd like to hear how the movie ends, and more discussions of its meaning, then I will be covering all of that in the spoiler zone after the main show. And yes, that was me clapping my hands at how clever I was about making that pun. Now, one of the criticisms that comes up a lot about Underwater is that it's very derivative. You can certainly see the influences of Alien, for example, on the movie. But let's face it, if you're going to borrow elements from a movie, then you could do a lot worse than Ridley Scott's masterpiece. It certainly does have that same kind of lived-in functional appearance. The suit designs do look similar to the spacesuits in Alien, although to be fair, I'm not sure how a suit designed for a hostile environment really could look that much different. And yes, it's about a group of blue-collar working guys trying to survive in an intense situation, but honestly, I don't mind these influences. And the simple fact is that having this group of people who know each other, who are workmates and are friends, it works really well in the context of the movie. They do very simple things like they call each other by name and they hug when they meet each other. And it really gives you this sense of them being people together in a hostile environment trying to help each other out. They're friends. They know each other, they have background with each other. And it means that when one of them does actually die, there is an impact both on the characters and on us as a viewer. I also like that it's a very taut and well constructed movie. There's very little slack and no dead weight. The disaster strikes, the survivors do smart things to survive, and I love movies where smart people get themselves out of situations by being smart, but they formulate a plan and then they do the best to execute it. And it's like Kevin Smith once said, if you have a scene with two people talking, put them on a roller coaster. And this movie does that really well. There are very few scenes where the characters are just sitting and talking, but at the same time, they manage to really convey a sense of well-rounded characters, all while being constantly under threat. The movie also does that really smart thing with its creatures where it shows you just enough so that you know that they're a threat, but they don't reveal them too early. And again, going back to the Alien comparisons, this movie does a really good job of teasing the clingers, as they're called, where you'll just see a little bit of movement just from the corner of the eye, or they're just beyond the lights of the crew's flashlights, so you can't quite make out what they are. You can see that there is something, and it's something quite horrible, but you just do not see them long enough to really register what it is that you're actually looking at. Now initially the designers were going to use a creature that was kind of just a giant squid, but as they went on with the movie they realised that they could do something a lot more, and in post-production, when they were actually watching some of the dailies, there was a stunt performer crawling on all fours chasing Kristen Stewart, and they looked at it and they realised that this was such a creepy image that they came up with the idea of, and this is a little bit of a spoiler, but the idea of having a 3 metre tall skinny man just standing underwater really was the stuff of nightmares. And then if you add to this that they have these really slimy, squishy mouths with tentacles, and they can even distend their jaw and envelop an entire person, and yes, we do see that in the movie, and you'll just see how creative and how creepy these creatures really are. Now, the production was reportedly extremely taxing. Now, despite what you might think, the majority of the movie was not actually shot underwater. What the crew did instead was create a dry for wet technique, which is kind of a play on that process where they would film at daytime and then use a filter to make it look like nighttime. So what they did is they actually filmed the cast in diving suits on a soundstage, which was built in an abandoned Lowe's home improvement store of all places, and they had a layer of movie fog pumped in around them. So this technique was used where basically what would happen is when they shone a flashlight, it would refract within the fog, which mimics how it would appear underwater. And then the cast were wearing helmets that didn't actually have glass in them, but glass was added in post-production along with all of the reflections on that, and then a whole bunch of effects like algae and silt and a whole bunch of other stuff just floating around in this water, and then they would CGI enhance the suit appearance, and it really gives it this look that they are genuinely underwater. It's very difficult to spot. When I first started watching this, I was like, did they film this whole thing underwater? And no, they didn't. It was, as I say, dry for wet. But this did exact a very heavy toll on the cast. They were trapped in 80-pound suits for the majority of the filming, so they would sweat profusely. The suits were not comfortable. They said it took 20 to 30 minutes to get in and out of them, and they were very, very difficult to move in. And then add to this the fact that they had to act as if they were walking underwater, so they had to move in a buoyantly slow way, but also perform all of their dialogue at a normal speed for 10 to 12 hours a day. But if you watch this movie, you will see it was definitely worth it, because it looks incredible. Now, Underwater was unfortunately a box office bomb. The takings didn't even cover the production costs, let alone the marketing costs. It's not that Fox did much to market it anyway, but, you know, it's a real shame because this is a genuinely enjoyable monster movie that manages to deliver all the thrills and tension and all of the excitement that you'd expect. But like great movies such as The Thing and Alien, it also has that extra level of smarts that really raise it to be something special. Performances are all strong, the script has a real sense of realism that just works, and each character brings something to the table. They're not just faceless nobodies to be fed to the monsters. We get a sense of who they are as people, of their fears, of their pasts, and their aspirations. And so when they do die, and yes, sorry, there are deaths in this movie, but you know, it wouldn't be much of a creature feature without them. But it does have an emotional impact, not just on the crew, but also on us as a viewer. So if you are looking for a movie that delivers smart, well-rounded characters, great effects and monster designs, with a rollercoaster of action, tension and story, then you could do a whole lot worse than give Underwater a watch. I find it genuinely frustrating that a movie with so much craft and passion and imagination behind it just never found an audience on its release. And on that note, I'll sign off. But don't forget that we have the spoiler zone coming up after the show, where I'll discuss the movie's ending and some of the themes we've touched on here, just with massive spoilers. You can learn more about the Real Obscure podcast by visiting our website at www.realobscurepod.com. As well as social media and contact details, you'll also find links to the various streaming platforms on which the podcast is available. And I'd really appreciate it if you could like this episode, share the podcast, and subscribe. Underwater is copyright 2020 by 20th Century Fox. Their content is used for educational and commentary purposes under Section 107 of the Copyright Act, fair use, and remains the property of the respective copyright holder, presented here for the purpose of critique, commentary and discussion. No copyright infringement is intended, so please don't sue us. Okay, so let's enter the spoiler zone. As you might expect, there are a number of deaths in this movie, so we're just going to take a quick look at what happens to everybody. Rodrigo is the first to go, dying in a pressurization accident. It's subtle, but when the crew are suiting up, he's seen selecting helmets for them to wear. The one he chooses for himself is damaged, and it's a risk he takes to ensure his workmates are not endangered by his choice. As the crew attempt to leave the station, the pressure from the outside water flooding into the chamber causes the helmet to crack, leading to his death. It's a little moment of self-sacrifice that may go over your head if you're not really paying attention, but it is there and it's just a nice little character moment. Paul is dragged away by an unseen entity. We later learn that it's one of the clingers, but despite the crew's best efforts, they can't save him, and he is literally torn out of his suit. Similarly, Captain Lucian is dragged away by one of the clingers with Nora in tow because they're connected through a safety cord, and realising he's dragging Nora to her death, he releases the cord and then lets her go, and he implodes as the water pressure becomes too great for his suit to handle. Nora survives this, but she is lost and left alone. She manages to make her way to the abandoned Shepherd station, where she's able to repair and refill her suit's oxygen supply, and she finds a locker belonging to Lucian, which was left behind when the Kepler station was built. Now, in an earlier scene, Lucian, who is very much a father figure to Nora, mentions his daughter is 14 years old. Nora corrects him, saying, "No, she's much closer to my age," which Lucian then agrees to, shaking off his earlier confusion. But it's revealed here, thanks to an order of service card Nora finds in his old locker, that Lucian's daughter actually died at the age of 14. And given that she would be around Nora's age, that kind of explains why he does act as a protector and father figure toward her. Again, it's just a nice little character moment. There are a lot of them in this movie. So Nora completes the repairs and then heads out once more. She's able to catch up with Emily, who has managed to drag the injured Smith much closer to their destination, despite the fact that she's alone and in a semi-delirious state of terror. Nora, Emily and Smith arrive at the Roebuck station, only to find an entire hive of clingers, seemingly in hibernation, in a wonderfully creepy scene that sees a mass of slick, fleshy limbs dangling between them and the station door. So as they attempt to sneak through this undulating mass, Emily's low oxygen warning triggers, which begins to awaken the clingers. With her air almost gone, Nora sends Emily ahead with Smith while she fights off the clinger that's grabbed onto her. This leads to the scene where Nora's entire head and body are enveloped by the clinger as it attempts to swallow her. However, thanks to some quick thinking and an underwater flare, she's able to kill the creature and is shaken loose. Inexplicably, the other sleeping clingers all begin to rise upward, and as Nora watches, she sees that they're all embedded into a larger something. She fires a second flare into the depths above her, and she sees the faint outline of a truly dreadful creature. Fans of H.P. Lovecraft will find this creature very familiar. Now, among fans of this film, there is debate as to whether this actually is Cthulhu. It certainly looks like him, and from the malevolent stare he gives Nora, it's clearly a sentient being. I'll leave it up to you to make up your mind, but I will say this is the best rendition of Cthulhu I have ever seen on film. The sheer scale of the creature is amazing, and it truly captures the awesome terror that you would feel when faced with something so alien. At this point, Nora's air supply fails, but she's dragged inside by Emily, who is able to smash her damaged helmet open, thus allowing her to breathe once more. Together with the injured Smith, they make their way to the escape pods, placing the barely conscious man in the first. Unfortunately, only 2 pods are still functioning, and so Nora forces Emily into the second. We learned in an earlier scene that 2 years ago Nora's fiancé disappeared during a dive, and this is the he that she mentions during her opening monologue. Now she sees that Emily and Smith have developed feelings for each other, and she argues that they deserve to be together, that she would give anything to have just one more second with her fiancé Sam, and they have a whole life ahead of them. And so, accepting this argument, Emily acquiesces and Nora launches the pod. With her friend saved, she just drops to the floor, and it's a scene that very much echoes the earlier scene when we meet Captain Lucian in the Kepler pod bay. Like Nora, he's saved everybody he cares about, and now he's got nothing left, and so it's just simply a case of waiting for the end. But then Nora's attention is caught by the radar, which shows that the Clingers and the Behemoth are giving pursuit to the escape pods. So she realises she can save her friends' lives by overloading the Roebuck's nuclear core, and so she triggers a detonation large enough to destroy all of the creatures, but allowing Emily and Smith to escape. Accepting her fate and triggering the meltdown, she walks to the window and stares into the face of the Behemoth as the base is engulfed in a white explosion. Quick side note here, obviously the character's name is Nora, which is derived from the Arabic word nur, which means light. Now it's interesting, the studio actually requested an alternative version of the ending where Nora was able to repair an escape pod and survive. Kristen Stewart hated this and tooth and nailed, as she put it, to keep the original ending. She even went as far as making fart noises during the filming, just to try and render the footage useless. Now thankfully sensible heads prevailed, and we got this simultaneously both downbeat and also uplifting ending. And so on that note, I'm going to sign off. I think I've covered everything that we need to discuss here. I really do hope that you found this enjoyable and that it gets you to go out and give Underwater a watch if you haven't seen it. And if you have, I'd love to hear what you think of what I've said here and what your thoughts on the movie are itself. So until next time, thanks for listening, and I'll see you on the next episode of Real Obscure. Take it away, Manfred and Siggy.